Welcome to the Under the Hat podcast,
the show where we talk about everything and anything that is top of mind in education.
The goal is to provide meaningful conversations to what is currently happening in our classrooms.
Stories, pains,
moments of success.
We want to hear it all.
Hello.
Friends, welcome. We just said bye earlier, and we're back. And so, Kelsey, we probably didn't mention this, and you may have caught it, but we did a double header today.
Oh, so fun.
Totally my fault with life.
It's true Steve fashion. Sorry, we double booked.
Yeah. No, we double booked. But I love the show. I love podcasting. I love talking to folks. So
yeah,
I don't mind at all. Yeah. And so Kelsey Sorenson, folks, we're chatting with Kelsey about teacher self-care, prioritizing that self-care.
Yes.
Spoiler, This might get very deep and philosophical. We were chatting about that earlier.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, super pumped. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me up here and chat with your audience. And it sounds like you even just watching that little beginning clip of what you do. I love what you do here at your Under the Hat podcast. So fun.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I helped a little bit with the rebrand because if you didn't know, Kelsey, I wasn't a co-host season 1. I was a guest.
Okay. Oh, fun.
And I was a guest and a frequent watcher, and now I'm co-hosting. Steve and I are besties.
This is true. This is true. But she was joining so often and contributing so much. It got to the point where, girl, you just be a co-host and let's just do it. But yeah, so I am super grateful to have Sophie. Thank you for that feedback. When I started the show, super nerve-wracking of is anyone even going to listen? Is he you have that, but then learning all the things, the behind the scenes is kind of wild. You don't really think about it until you actually do it.
Yeah, there's so much that goes into it that you don't know until you're doing it. Everyone else is just, you just get on a live stream, but there's a lot.
Well, and you have a show of your own, correct?
Yeah, it's called the Educate and Rejuvenate podcast. I'll have to have you two on. It'll be fun.
Yes. Love. That's really how all this started, where I was I felt like I was jumping on a podcast every week.
And
I was like, wait a second, I could do this. And it's fun. I like jumping on and talking.
It's so fun.
Yeah. So absolutely love it. And so Sophie,
so you, Kelsey,
let's get this ball rolling here.
So you, Kelsey, you are a former educator and you are currently homeschooling your kids. Oh, God,
yes.
Yeah. Bless you. You're founder of Educate and Rejuvenate. You're a certified life coach from the Life Coach School and author of a book that is just recently launched, Educate and Rejuvenate. You are the host of your own podcast, Educate and Rejuvenate. I'm seeing a pattern.
Yeah. It's actually a very new pattern. We rebranded this year. So
I saw on your website, it says, that you rebranded. I think it's fantastic that the title, that Educate and Rejuvenate, and it sort of just encompasses everything that we're going to talk about today, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So to kick us off, tell us a little bit more about your education journey.
Yeah, so I started out, teaching 3rd grade and, loved it, loved the kids. Then I had my oldest child and I was like, okay, I'm not going to be able to leave him every day. So then I started substitute teaching while kind of going back and forth, stay at home mom some days, subbing other days, so to be more part-time. Loved that because it gave me such a wide perspective of the different grade levels, right? I never took secondary jobs. I took elementary jobs. That's more my jam. I did elementary ed. So, but then I got to, sub in kindergarten through 6th grade, because it goes through 6th grade here. And so it was such an eye-opening experience to actually be on both sides too, to see like, oh yeah, I know it's a pain planning for a sub, and then being a sub, I did that for 4 or 5 years, while also I started my teachers paid teachers store, which the big thing I did then was my ready to go sub plans, because I was subbing, like I'd been a teacher, I was now subbing. I did them partially just so I had something to bring with me when I didn't have enough to get through the day. But then teachers loved them. It kind of became my business and everything. I called it wife, teacher, mommy, just because like I started it shortly after I had my son, and I was just so excited to be like a mommy. Like I didn't think it was going to go anywhere. So it's just like a name I threw up on TPT. And when you do a TPT name, a lot of people like it's just their own name or whatever. So it was describing me. Over the years, it really became a community and everything. And then we'd have people be like, oh, like, well, I'm not married, or I'm a guy, or like, I don't have kids or whatever. So it was kind of like a sticky point. And I was like, well, you're like, you're still part of it and everything. And it was a couple years I like wanted a new name. I wanted a rebrand, while at the same time we were hosting a conference that we called Educate and Rejuvenate. And then it was actually while I was writing my book and trying to come up with the title for my book that I was like, I was actually on a road trip with my husband. Do you ever find that your best ideas come when you're not working? Like,
in the shower, driving home.
Yeah,
those are the places.
So I'm on a road trip. We're driving to California to get away. Really, for me to actually, I had a deadline for my book, and I was like, I just needed to get away and write. And I was like, I just don't know what to call it. And we're just talking. I was like, wait, people love the name Educate and Rejuvenate for our event. What if I name my book that? And then it was like 5 minutes later, I'm like, wait a second. We've been wanting to rename the membership for so long, so people feel like no matter what, they're included. What if we call it that? I'm like, wait, what if we just fully rebrand? So then it was in January we came up with that idea, and then by May we made the big announcement of rebranding everything, the book title, all of that. So that's kind of been the journey in. And then the homeschooling too. I started that in 2019. It was just kind of an experiment. It was deciding whether we're going to put my son in kindergarten or homeschool. My husband, he was actually the one really like, oh yeah, we should homeschool. But of course, at the time I was the one doing all of it. So I'm like, oh yeah, well, it's easy for you to say,
Right? Yeah.
But I love teaching. I wasn't like, I was like with my company, I wasn't able to go back in the classroom. And also we both work from home. So we're like, then we can just like we like, for example, like in January, just driving to California and like whenever we want. So that's why we did it. And it's been working out for us. So, we'll do it as long as it keeps working out. And luckily, like with the pandemic, it was nice because it actually didn't throw off our routine with teaching the kids, but it did throw off. I had to basically completely pivot the business. So it was nice that only one thing got thrown off, right? Because I know with COVID, everybody in the classroom, it was like going back and forth and back and forth. And so we had to change up what we were doing to serve teachers. Like we made home learning packets. Then we realized like, oh my goodness, teachers are so burned out. And that's when I certified as a life coach and went into kind of everything I'm doing now, like this hard pivot just from printables to we need a more holistic solution to this teacher burnout issue. So anyway, that's kind of my journey. Just in a nutshell.
So maybe I'm super dense, but like kind of what I'm hearing is Sophie can speak to that. Kind of what I'm hearing is so I'm trying to think like the services or like the pain point that you're solving, right?
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you're providing a few different things, like ready to go resources.
Yeah.
Perhaps instructionally, but also like you're also providing services on a more like human level too, right? Am I understanding that correctly? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Really everything we do, like at first it was just like the time saving resources, right? And that's still part of it. But what we want to help teachers with, I feel like the biggest 3 things we help with are first is teacher time. Like we feel like we don't have time for everything. So there's resources, but there's also beyond that, there's like the time management piece that we help with in our coaching and understanding what's important, what's not, having boundaries, things like that. Like there's a lot more to teacher time and the time issue than just like, oh, I'm going to get a printable off TPT. There's like, cause you buy that, but then you're just like going to move on to the next thing. And, for example, I was coaching a teacher recently who led yes to helping with her coworker's bulletin board. And then she spent like 5 hours on the bulletin board. And the teacher, even her teacher colleague who she said yes to do it for, was like, oh, I did not expect you to do like that extent of a bulletin board, you know, or even to do it. She just like volunteered and did it. So it's kind of like holding boundaries, right? Like, what is it? She was like, and then I don't get to be with my spouse, you know? And so it's just like understanding the reason why we're doing things, what's urgent, what's important, all that. So time management. Then there's also burnout, right? Burnout is huge. And so many teachers, we actually did a poll on our Educate and Rejuvenate Instagram recently. And I asked, how many of you feel like you put your job ahead of yourself? And there were 3 options. There was always or almost always, sometimes or rarely / never. And guess how many picked always or almost always? What percent?
Oh, I was gonna say at least 95, if not more.
It was 78, but
okay.
78.
Oh, we're eyeballing
20-something
it. Okay.
put 20-something put sometimes. And sometimes they put sometimes. Only 2% said rarely or never. So if there weren't that sometimes option, I bet it would have been 98 in the always or almost always, right? So I feel like it's a huge problem, right? I mean, would you agree?
Yeah.
It is. Oh yeah, definitely. Speaking for myself, I'm one of those people, like if I'm going to commit to something, I'm all in. I am your client that would spend 5 hours on a bulletin board because it's going to look awesome, especially because I'm doing it for somebody else. If I'm doing it for me, I'm going to half-ass it, do it a little bit. I'm going to not work as hard for it because it's for me. And I know that like my standards are a little bit, you know, whatever. But if I'm doing it for someone else, I'm going to go above and beyond, and I'm going to be there. Yeah, and you mentioned boundaries. I don't have any boundaries.
So, a few things here. First of all, Sophie, shame on you.
I know.
But and then also like your what she was talking about me, because her standards are here, and we work for the same company. So she, so like she knows her standards on certain things are way higher than mine, unfortunately. But going back to it though, like with the burnout and kind of just where I guess teachers, but just in professionals, like just in general.
Yeah, in general, yeah.
It's like the passionate people that always get taken advantage of, right? And especially in the teacher space where they're like, oh yeah, you're passionate, so you're okay. You're okay putting in all these hours.
Or you can join another committee, or, oh, because you're such a good teacher, we're going to give you these harder students because we know you can do it. You know, we're going to put them all in your class. Like I hear that, like, they're like, oh, thanks. Like, you know,
you're doing so awesome here, have more responsibility. And that is not just in the education world. It is, but yeah, like your reward for being awesome at what you do is a punishment. Here's more.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So burnout is a huge problem. Yeah.
Huge. Yeah. And so like this whole concept of a life coach.
Yes.
I've seen that term before. In just living life. Like I've seen that term. Though and maybe again, dense maybe, or oblivious to certain things. I've not seen this concept specifically in the education space though.
Yeah, there aren't very many of us who do it in the education space. I mean, there are a few, like a few pioneers in it, like Elena Aguilar. She's done a lot of coaching with teachers. And then Chrissy Nichols she was kind of the first one from the life coach school who then joined my membership. She coaches in my membership now too. But really, it is kind of a newer concept. Even life coaching in general is probably kind of a newer concept. Like a lot of people know, like therapy, for example, a life coach is not a therapist. We don't have the same training of a therapist. We don't have like medical credentials. We're not going to help you with like deep depression or any of that. What a life coach is here to help you with is to make positive change, like to reach your goals. Like if your goal is to have more time with your family and not burn yourself out teaching, things like that. And to be able to really just get a deeper understanding of yourself. Like a lot of what I talk about in the book, I have a 3-step coaching framework that I teach in the book. So it's and I use a lot of like metaphors that are education specific. So for example, this isn't the right page, but I have a 3-step coaching framework. This is really what kind of explains what we do as a life coach. We help you to really just kind of to know yourself better. Am I frozen on the screen?
It's popping up.
It's been coming in, bouncing in and out.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, here it is. Okay. Right in the intro. I'm like, where's the one that actually says all three? Here we go. So in the book, I have a 3-step framework. So the first thing we do is to observe ourselves. So we really just kind of get to know ourselves a little bit more, because we spend so much time on what our students need, what our family members need, what our spouse wants, what our parents want, what our kids want, everybody else in our lives. We don't pay as much attention to what our own needs are. It's really tuning into that. And when I say observe yourself, I mean, the big things we look at, there are 3 big things we want to look at. We want to look at our thoughts, how our thoughts are driving so much of our lives, our perception. We look at what we can't control, our circumstances, and our thoughts, which are what we can control. So we look a lot at our thoughts. We also look at our feelings. We observe feelings, like, what emotions am I feeling right now? There's a lot of mindfulness to it. There's, like, meditation. There's really being in touch with, like, oh, like, I'm feeling burned out. My heart is racing. I need to actually pay attention to what it is that I'm feeling. And then our nervous system, we need to make sure that we are regulated, that we're taking care of ourselves, because we spend so much time. And I talk about in the book about the stress cycle, because we get stressed out a lot as teachers. If we don't complete the stress cycle, we might get stuck in there. We might, like, not be able to release that stress, even if the stressor is gone. So, like, an example, like, if you have a principal come in and do an observation, and they leave the room, like, you would think your body be like, okay, good, I'm good now. But no, right? It's like our body, like, it's as if they're still there, and we still feel that stress. So we need to do something to release that. So we want to pay attention to those 3 things. And then the next step of it is to choose your direction. So that is where kind of consciously, like, be like, okay, this is how I've been thinking. This is how I've been feeling. This is what I've been doing. This is how often I've been regulated or dysregulated. And this is where you kind of get to choose what you want to do with that information. Like, how is it I actually want to think about this? What are some positive, like, what is some reframing I can do that's still true to myself, right? It's not just like toxic positivity, like, oh, I just need to think better about that. There are times where, we want to keep a lot of the thoughts, like, especially if they have to do with our core beliefs, like, or, things you're advocating for. Like, for me, like, a lot of things in education, I'm like, no, it's not okay the way it is right now. And I'm okay still believing that. So again, we want to choose our direction and be conscious about it. And then we want to align ourselves with it. So that's where we, like, make sure it's kind of like we create a map for what we want, like creating our goals, creating habits that are going to help us regulate ourselves. And I even talk about how it helps the students too, how you can, like, build in, like, a brain, things like that, to help your students also do that, because these same things that happen with us happen with our students. So when you kind of get a deeper understanding of it at a personal level, you're able to help others more, right? So we kind of create that map, and then we align ourselves with it. We check in. We're like, oh, am I doing what I want to do or not? One thing I talk about in the book is even creating, like, a vision board, that you can make one for your, like, for teaching, like, for, how you want to feel about your teaching career and all that, or just personal goals and everything. We create our goals. We find a community who's going to support and uplift us, because we talk about the research of the people we surround ourselves with actually impact the way we think, the way we feel, what we do, because we feed off of each other. We talk about so many different things in the book. I can possibly talk about all of it right now, but that's kind of, like, in a nutshell, what it would help you with as a life coach.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I kind of like hearing you describe all this. There was a lot of things going through my head, like, even, like, specific examples or things that I encountered, whether it was, like, the teacher's lounge or sitting at home. Like, we don't always unpack what's in our mind. Yeah. For good, bad, or otherwise, right? Right. And something that did come to mind is, so, like, Kelsey, like, you may not know this about me, but I'm part-time. I do teach at my university, helping our student teachers getting. Oh, cool. I do their observations, and I'm out in the streets with them. A lot of fun. But so these sometimes young people are entering the profession, and then they start taking over a few classes. Like, this semester, I have 2 interns, like, they're doing the whole job for the first time. And they're like, oh my gosh, teaching is hard. I'm like, yeah, teaching is hard. But a lot of times what they hear with the people around them, from the people around them, is like within the area or the topic of stress, they hear, oh, that's normal. That's normal. But like, there's something wrong with that, right? Like there's
the fact
something
that
wrong.
that is normal.
Yeah. But also like, if even if you're going to make that statement of like, hey, that's normal as a veteran teacher, I feel like you need to continue that conversation. Like you need to follow up with that with, this is what you do with that stress. And that's kind of what you're describing here. And really that information needs to be in the hands of every human for that matter.
Well, and of course we're going to feel stress. We're going to feel overwhelmed. We're going to feel the full range of emotions that we're going to feel. But it's, what do we do with it? And also, why are teachers having it at such an unprecedented level compared to other professions? We talk about that in the book too. There was a Gallup panel and they measured burnout and stress in different professions, and teachers outranked all the other professionals, I think, except maybe doctors. Again, like, so there's so much stress to it. And that does kind of, bring up a deeper conversation of the why, like why for teachers. And one thing I was actually, even just right before this podcast, I was filming a reel I'm going to post today about this popular teacher quote that I really hate. Let me know if you've heard this one. It's, a good teacher is like a candle. It consumes itself to light the way for others.
Yes. That was on like a t-shirt, like my teacher group shirt. Like we made shirts for the community we had at the college that we were all going to. And it said that, like, a teacher is like a candle. They consume themselves to light the way for others.
Yeah. And I hate that quote. Like, it totally sucks. Like, am I allowed to say that? Like, but because like, think about the meaning of the word consumes. What does that mean to you, Sophie? What does it mean when you say to consume yourself? Like, what is it a candle does?
It burns away. It goes slowly away. And then like, you're giving of yourself to them. And so when I was a young, stupid kid, like in college, getting ready to do this, not married, don't have any kids, you're giving of yourself. And I'm like, oh, I am doing that. I'm giving of myself to these kids so that they can get better. And I'm bringing myself into the classroom so that they won't have the same experiences that I had when I was in whatever. But then like, you're giving more than just your time and your knowledge. You are giving everything into these kids if you don't do something to do it. Like,
if you keep lighting that candle, eventually it's going to burn out.
It's going to burn out.
Literally.
Not anymore.
It's going to burn out. Nothing left.
Look at that. Look what you did. Look what you did.
So that's why I don't like that quote. We want to light the way for others, but I think that consuming ourselves is not the way to do that. That's why the book is Educate and Rejuvenate. We have to rejuvenate. We can't just consume all the time.
Well, and that's where that the visual that I like specifically is like, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
You can't, if you don't fill yourself back up, you can't keep pouring into your kids. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I just think the fact that quotes like that are so second nature, that it's like, oh yeah, we consume ourselves to like we almost put ourselves on this pedestal, like, and because we want to help people so much. And it's like, we need, like, like teaching is for the income, not the outcome, not the income. And like all these quotes that are just about like, oh, like it's a calling. Yes. Like, and it's like partially true, but it's not fully true because I also need to make a living wage and I also need to take care of myself, and I like, it's just that attitude of teachers just need to be in it. Like, it's all service. It's all doing it, all thinking of everybody else, nothing for yourself. And that's what I think needs to change. And that's why so many teachers are leaving the profession. That's partially why, like, I'm doing this now, like I felt like I couldn't manage that and my family. So yeah, but that's what I'm trying to help change now that I'm really in this work, And
it's also like, I don't know, like a deeper level, it's ingrained into like our culture, like on a societal level. I had this conversation with my students recently about this, of like, it's almost like for so long, like this idea of like, oh, being really busy, like, oh, we're so busy.
Like a badge.
Oh, you don't know, like if you go do like a girls' night out, or I go hang out with someone or whatever, be like, oh man, it's so busy. As if it's like, if it's like this badge of honor, be like, no, I'm busier. Almost like it's a
I'm more
positive
important.
thing.
Yeah. I'm more important because I'm busy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I was so busy I didn't get enough sleep last night. Like, and I only slept 4 hours of sleep or whatever. And I'm like, no, that's not something to be bragging about.
No. I mean, it's coming from a good place, right? Like, we're not saying anything bad about these people. And whoever came up with that quote originally, I mean, it's just everywhere. I don't know who came up with it. Like, again, it was coming from a good place, coming from the culture, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
It's just that this culture is not what's going to be healthy and long-term sustainable.
I wonder if it came back from like when women weren't allowed to work if they were pregnant. They weren't allowed to work if they were married and whatnot. They had to go home and so like that is your whole life. If you're a teacher, that is the only thing that's going on in your life. There's nothing else going on. So you are consuming yourself because you're not allowed to go out and socialize. You had these certain standards. I mean, I've read them before, like the old time standards of like, you're not allowed to wear certain things. You're not allowed to do certain things out in public. You had standards in your personal life. So you literally had no life. That was it. You were a teacher until you got married and you got pregnant and then you had to quit. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, that's what it was like. So my husband's grandma, she just passed a couple months ago at 103.
Wow.
So I was reading some of the things. She was a teacher, right? So she taught before she had her kids. And then she lived 103, but her first husband passed when he was 36. So eventually she was a single mom and then having to teach and all that. And she could because she was a single mom, anyway. But like just seeing like the way things were and like, oh yeah, she had to quit. And I'm like, wait, she had to? Like, I mean, and I did out of choice. So then I went part-time, but like I didn't have to, it's just crazy how things have changed.
Yeah. It's nuts.
Yeah. We earlier kind of pull it back a little bit, like, cause you talked about the stress cycle.
Yeah.
What happens if you don't finish the cycle? What happens when, let's say you get into the life coach thing, you're getting supported. And again, not to compare it, because you made the statement earlier, not to compare it to therapy but
right.
What happens when it just doesn't go right the first time, or you really feel like I'm in a unique situation, let's say, and now like, that has to be challenging, or maybe even like a lot of pressures on you, like, whoa, what's wrong with me that this thing that's helped other people is not helping me?
Yeah. And it can be that you're outside of, and I talk about this in the book, there's like a window of tolerance. Have you heard of that phrase before? It's from Dan Siegel. So there's like, we have our window of tolerance where it's like, we can handle things when we're in this window, and it's bigger for some people, it's smaller for other people. You can like make it bigger by practicing the nervous system regulation that we talk about in the book. But what happens if you get stuck? You can be stuck in a hyper aroused state. That's when you're in like fight or flight, when your body's like gearing up to either like, fight the threat or to run away from it. That's when you're kind of probably feeling more anxiety. Like if you were to like think about like what, like anxiety or depression, it's probably more like anxiety, more like high level, and then you could be, so it's hyper aroused, or there's hypo aroused, or you might be in one of the either fawning, which is a state a lot of people don't know about. A lot of people are like, oh, I knew fight, flight, freeze, but I didn't know fawn. So fawning is like chronic people pleasing, which is what a lot of teachers do. That's when like, oh yes, I say yes to everything. I do this, I do that. And then freezing, when it's just like, I can't do anything. Like I'm just trying to, like, it's when your body's honestly like trying to shut down. And it's actually, if you get stuck in this, you might get sick more often, because one of the things your body is shutting down, the less essential things, is your immune system. So you can actually get sick more often if you get stuck in that state. So you can be like, there are some people who are like, oh, wow, I feel like I've chronically been stuck in like one of these states. Like, and that could be more, and again, I'm not a therapist, but like, it could be more like depression that you're feeling if you're stuck in one of those states. Right. And what happens is you're just not able to get to that, back to that baseline, and you're kind of stuck there. There are in the book 7 ways we talk about getting out of this cycle, and they're actually pretty simple. And a lot of it comes from the book Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. Have either of you heard of that book? It's so good. one of the example clients is a teacher, which I'm like, this is so appropriate because teachers go through this big time. But there's 7 things. And like the biggest one, actually, the best one that they say is actually just physical activity. Because when you think about it, if you're wanting to fight or flight, for example, like that's your body wanting to get it out, like moving to get it out. And you would need to kind of feel into what that is you need. It might be maybe you need a high intensity workout to really, especially if you're in like fight or flight. If you're like more like freeze or fawn, maybe you need to do some like, yin yoga or something, like something that's really going to like help you simmer down, or like a slow walk in nature outside. Things like that can help you move through it. But deep breathing is another one, because sometimes like if you might be like teaching and you suddenly find yourself activated, you're not gonna be like, stop kids, I need to go for a walk or whatever. So
just gonna leave you unsupervised. I'm gonna go do like 100 push-ups. Yeah, no.
Yeah. So like just like taking some intentional breaths, like you already have to breathe no matter what, right? So you can take a moment to take some intentional breaths. You can even have your students do it with you. It's very helpful for them too, like building that in to help everybody regulate. There are more that I talk about in the book, like creative expression, affection, crying is actually a good release, laughter. I'm trying to think, what are the other ones? But anyway, there are ways that you move out of it. And obviously, if you're like, there's like nervous system activation, and then there's trauma too. And a lot of us, I mean, I would say everybody has been impacted by some sort. Obviously, there's like big T trauma, there's little T trauma. If you get too deep into that, you're definitely in more like therapy territory. But it's just important to be conscious of it and aware of it. A lot of teachers even have some trauma from like COVID and going in and out of the classroom and worrying about their safety, worrying about their students' safety, what is going to happen in education, all these gaps we're trying to fill, and how much harder that's been getting. And it still is, like, we're still seeing the result, like the impact of that. And that's like a collective trauma that a lot of teachers have had. So it's really just important to keep that in mind. Like, and that's why I talk about, there's kind of this like flow chart where if you're not like regulated, you're not going to want to be looking at your thoughts. If you're not regulated, you're going to want to get regulated first before you do that, because that's kind of the most important. You got to tune into yourself and see what it is that you need.
And so this is all amazing, like, and super, super powerful conversation here. And for me, like recently, I've been, trying to be more proactive of like taking care of myself, like working from home now, right?
Yeah.
I've experienced my own challenges and stuff, but very recently, not to make a joke out of this, but it kind of is. I've started doing yoga.
I love yoga.
So I low key really never got into yoga. I had a chance to do it in community college. And then so here's a story. About 19 years old, I took yoga because I just needed an extra unit or whatever. I showed up, and then all the teacher, like the teacher and the entire rest of the class, they're all female. And I felt really intimidated because everyone was like, I could tell they were yoga-ers. Like, I'm like, I'm not gonna be the one bro in here like that can't move a certain way, do a certain thing, right? And
they would have probably been extremely welcoming. And
probably.
So many, they would have been great. Like,
this was, but keep in mind, this is 19-year-old Steve, right?
Or they thought you were only taking the class so that you could see them bend. Like that was.
And then that was the other part too. I'm like, you know what? Maybe this whole thing is not for me. So I dipped out. And so, but I started doing it recently. I pay I don't know how much money for the Apple Fitness thing. And so
I love that.
They're super, super good. And I've been doing it, and I'm like, wow, I didn't realize how good this is. And not just like the physical part of it, because there are parts where I'm like, can I bend that way? Oh, this hurts. But also like it's good, like mind, body, and soul kind of thing, right?
Yes. Yeah.
However, I can find the time to do it. I'm not in the classroom anymore, though. So, Kelsey, going back to the time management piece, like, what would you say to, like, because these teachers, they're sometimes they get up at 5, 6 in the morning. They may have to plan before they get to school, or they have to get their own kids ready.
Yeah.
They go to school, they they get maybe that one prep, like that 1 hour to plan, which is
Hour.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
Mine was like an hour, but I know others that might be. Though my last
30
year
minutes.
teaching, I did pick up an optional, which means I didn't have a break all day. I taught
Yeah.
6 periods instead of 5. But and then like by the time you get out of school, by the time traffic, like you have to pick up your own kids, like I just
Your own
what
family activities.
what advice do you have from like the time management piece? Like where do they get back some of that time?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I kind of walk through like kind of my time planning process in the book. And there's actually like a PDF workbook that gives like worksheets and things that help with it too. But really, so there's kind of 2 ways I want to answer that question. So I'll go with both. So first, it's understanding that really what's urgent, what's important is really you do have limited time. So you need to figure out like where is my time going? You might even need to do like a time audit. We have a worksheet for that to see like, okay, where is there maybe stuff that's happening that doesn't need to happen so I can simplify. A lot of times we think something is like really, really important, but then when we actually take the time to question and analyze if it is, we can remove it. Like maybe spending 5 hours on a bulletin board, like we talked about before, maybe doesn't need to happen. So you can make time to do like 10 minutes of yoga or something. And that's the other thing is not having, maybe it's not that you go to an hour-long yoga class. Maybe you save that for Saturday or for Sunday. And during the week, you like have a minimum baseline. That's another concept to talk about in the book of like, yeah, I take care, like I'm a person who takes care of myself. I keep that promise to myself and I will spend at least 3 minutes a day, like on something to like move my body. Like that's doable, right? And likely if you get going, there are days where you're going to do more than that, but like that helps you get like that minimum baseline, like that habit, like, yes, I'm going to keep doing this. And then maybe again, it's like being conscious of it. Like, I do have more time on the weekends. So maybe that's when I can like go to a class or when I can do like a full thing on the Apple app or whatever it is. If that like, with yoga or whatever people are doing. It's really just, and also just making sure you schedule it in. Cause a lot of times like, oh yeah, I'll fit it in when I can. So what I try to do is like, you won't, right?
Yeah.
So I actually, every week I set aside time for my weekly planning. And before I do that, I actually have this concept of an ideal week that I talk about in the book, where so you kind of make a template for your week. It's like, okay, these are my contract hours, for example. This is when, and like, and maybe on some days you consciously decide you're going to stay this long past your contract hours or whatever. But again, you make that decision ahead of time, or when you have meetings or whatnot. And then after I plug in like the like essentials like that, or like, okay, my daughter has gymnastics on Tuesdays or whatever, those things that happen every week, then I'm like, okay, when is my self-care going to happen? And you kind of have a template every week that you start with. And then every week I go through and I just kind of tweak. I'm like, okay, well, this week I have a dentist appointment, so I got to make sure I get that in. Or, this week we have this birthday party for my son who I got to take to on Saturday or whatever. And I work out my week and I make sure that, everything for work is in there, but also my personal stuff. And when you get really intentional with that schedule, it helps. And before I do that, I actually do kind of what I call a thought download. A lot of people call it a brain dump, whatever. I write down everything my brain is telling me I have to do. And then I actually question it. I'm like, okay, do I have to do that? Or is there a way I could delegate that? Like, for example, grocery shopping. Like I could spend an hour, go to the store and grocery shop, or I can spend 15 minutes to put in an order for Walmart to deliver to me. Right. And pay like $6 for it. But then one impulse buy pays for that, like, so like, what are ways you can simplify, right? There are usually more than we think. So that's kind of a little part of what I talk about in the book, but there's a whole chapter 10, the whole chapter is about intentional scheduling and time management.
So kind of what I'm hearing is you have to set aside time to plan your planning. Like that's kind of, but no, I think that's genius. Like,
yeah.
So
I do it every Sunday night or Monday morning. Yeah. That's when I do it, somewhere in that range.
That's amazing. And I love the idea of a brain dump. I'm going to use that term. That's the term that we use at our company often. But like that brain dump of like visually seeing all of it. Yeah. And evaluating the priority. Because like when things are super busy, be like, oh, someone needs me to do this. It just gets on the list.
It's like the squirrel. Yeah. Like going everywhere. Yeah.
But like and then real justifying, like, is this something that I have to do, or can someone else do it? Is this something that I have to do, or can it be passed on to somebody else, or
can it not be done?
Does it need to be done this week? Like, does it need to happen?
Yeah. Now, sometimes we like still have things in our mind that's like, and maybe we don't have to do that for a month, but then it's in our mind, like taking up mental space. And that's the thing about the brain dump that I want to mention, because I actually have a lot of teachers when I teach this live or whatever, they'll be in the comments like, oh, that sounds way too overwhelming, like to even think about everything. But the thing is, if you don't put it down, then it's in your head. That's why it feels so overwhelming to do it, because you haven't gotten it down. When you get it down, suddenly like, it neutralizes it a little bit, and you can actually see it and be like, okay, this is
you don't have to worry about remembering it because it's written down. So you don't need to worry about trying to remember it, taking up that brain power of you trying to remember. Yes.
I feel like I do have a planner, but Kelsey, I feel like you're teaching me how to better use my planner. Like that's kind of
You talk about weeks, and I've been doing that like weekly type of thing. And I had like this giant weekly calendar at one point in time in my house, because there's 3 adults, 2 kids. Everybody has like appointments and responsibilities. And this was before I started working from home. And what I found was hard was to keep doing it every single week. Do you have any tips for that? Like just to keep up with that weekly routine?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just keeping it routine, and you can have it as like, for me, that like it is a little bit flexible. Like I'll either do it on Sunday night or I'll do it Monday morning. Like I do it one or the other, but I always do it. Just depending on what my week looks like. But I mean, it's kind of just having it set in a routine. Because what I find is my week is much more overwhelming if I don't do it. So I think just having a routine for it is what really helps. Like it is really that initial getting going with it that can be a bit challenging. And that's where also that ideal week template helps, because then you're not starting from scratch. It's more like, okay, what needs to be changed this week versus like, I need to start completely from scratch.
Yeah. And I would imagine like the longer you do it, the more clear it is of how to do it. Right. And maybe less time consuming too. Like if you set us, let's say you do it on Sunday, Monday, maybe after a month or two, like it just becomes who you are. Like it just becomes a part of you, which makes it a lifestyle change, right? Not this little thing that you're trying out.
Yeah, like it's not just a little hack, but like something you can do. And again, like I will always say, like, take what works for you and leave the rest. If you're like, oh, that doesn't completely work for me, or I want to do 2 weeks at a time, or I want to do a month at a time. Like, I mean, the weekly is like generally what I find the most helpful, but I'm also not like, you have to see how you feel about it and try what works for you,
Customize it out.
Yeah.
100%.
Personally, I find that like I've gone through these things like, oh, I'm gonna like this is gonna be great, and I will do great for like an entire month, and then I'll get like sick and won't do it for a while.
Yeah.
And then I don't jump back on that bandwagon of doing it. It's like that restarting all over again type of feel. So do you have any like tips or for people like that are like, I've done it, I've done it, and then they fell off?
Oh yeah. We talk about that a lot in the 3rd section of the book, Align Yourself. A lot of it is they're not going to be perfect. Like I mentioned, like I'm like, oh yeah, I do this every week. But I mean, I'd be lying if I say that there's weeks I haven't done it. Like even this year. Like, but then I notice the difference, right? I'm like the week of my event, like it's so different. And I would be like, oh yeah, I've got it down or whatever. And then it's like, oh yeah, I felt the difference that I didn't do that. So it's really just like noticing, like, okay, I got off track for a few days or for a week or whatever, and redirecting back. And it's more about how quickly you can change your comeback rate. This is actually, the comeback rate is a term I learned from Gabby Bernstein. And it's really like how quickly can you notice and redirect? And that's what it's about, because we're never going to be perfect. Like, for another example I give in the book is like, a lot of us might like stress eat, for example, like, after we get home from a long day of teaching. And, the first time we might notice like, oh, wow, I just ate a whole sleeve of Oreos or something. I shouldn't have done that. But you notice, then you're like, okay, I did, interesting. Check in. Why did I do that? Give yourself grace. And then maybe next time you notice like, oh, you ate one Oreo. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to put those away. I notice I'm eating because I'm stressed. I'm not hungry, And then the next time you notice when you walk into your pantry. And then the time after that, you notice like when you have the urge to do it. And it's like, how quickly can you redirect? And then maybe the next time it's back to eating 5 Oreos, but it's just noticing and redirecting. And the more often you do it, the more that becomes a habit, the noticing and redirecting. Same thing when you have a negative thought, like about, like if you're thinking like, oh, like I'm just such a terrible teacher or whatever. And then you actually notice yourself having that thought versus like before when you might not have noticed it. It doesn't mean you're never going to think that again. It just means that, oh, I'm becoming so much more conscious and aware of my own experience.
I love that. We could talk so much more. I feel we definitely have to be on your show to continue this conversation. We are coming up. We're 45 minutes into this episode. Great conversation, by the way. Super powerful. We do end the show though every time with this what I feel important question of what is under the hat for you, like what's top of mind in education. You've already said so much and with so much power, but with what you're seeing, like working with teachers, kind of like from your vantage point, the good, bad, or the ugly, like what is top of mind for you right now?
What's really top of mind for me is just like how much love all these teachers that I'm working with have for their students, have for other people in their lives, and how they're not always giving that back to themselves. Like like, we even did a self-love challenge back in February, and I can't tell you how many of the teachers like, I so needed this, was so hard. Like actually like, and some of them were just like, what positive things about yourself? Like, and it's just heartbreaking to me that these teachers, like, they are wonderful. Like I see them and I'm like, how can you not see how amazing and wonderful that you are and all the good that you're doing and all the wonderful things about themselves? And then all they notice is like, oh, well, I'm not working out enough, or, oh, I did this. Oh, I did that. Like, you are already doing so much. Like, what are the wins that you have? Like, you are doing so much. So the big thing that's top of mind for me is teachers, we need to learn how to take better care of ourselves, how to look at the positives about ourselves. And that's why I wrote my book. That's why I'm doing all these things, is because I want to help as many teachers as possible to be able to make that shift. And it's not like letting go of the helping our students. In fact, it's going to help us do it even better.
I feel like Steve booked you to talk to me. Because Steve does a lot of our scheduling and reaching out to people, and I do a lot more with the designing and things, because that's my happy place. But yeah, because I was that teacher that was like doing everything for everybody else and then not feeling like I was ever enough, which could go back to my own trauma of and all that jazz. Absolutely. But yeah, it's just one of those things. It's like, you're talking about this and I'm like, oh my God, that's me. Is every single teacher like me? Like, no, because then there's Steve, who is definitely not like that.
True.
We all have our things, right? But yeah, they're just different.
Yeah. And I think like, while we're like, talking about like looking after ourselves and like this awareness of who we are and what we need, but then also having the awareness of like what our friends need, what our colleagues need, like what our PLC needs, and like letting both complement each other with those boundaries, but also with the empathy and compassion of it too, right?
Oh yeah. And I feel like we're able to do that and help others with so much less resentment. Because sometimes, how often do you like do something, you're like, oh, I just did that because I had to or whatever. When you're taking care of yourself, you can do it out of love for your colleagues and like, yes, I want to help them,
100%.
Yes.
100%. This has been so good. And so for those that I see you all on Instagram, on YouTube, what have you. And if you are watching this, or listening rather, like in the car, if you're doing it the Spotify route, I'm going to drop all of Kelsey's links in the show notes, so that way everyone has access. For those that are watching here, that is the website. And so just super important work, right? And this is not something like, it just feels like so much. It's really authentic is what I'm trying to say. And like in the work that you're doing, and you have so much heart that goes into it. I just really appreciate you being here. But I do, for those that are watching as well, I would also like to show, I do have the website here. You can read chapter 1 for free.
Oh yeah, you can read chapter 1 for free. And there's also a ton of bonuses when you grab the book too. That's at the top of the website where you'll see there's like a bar. So tons of bonuses during launch week, but after too, it'll just be a little bit different. We got the podcast, the blog. Yep. We do hope to do a website redesign soon, but I mean, you'll find everything there.
Oh my gosh. I'm just loving it. Just as a podcaster, like I'm just on your podcast page. I'm like, oh, so good. So good.
We'll have you two on there soon.
Yes, please do. Please do. Happy to jump on. And so friends, just so you know, I know that fall queue is coming up. Those of you that were in the previous episode this morning, it's the weekend of October 5th that we're not running an episode, but next week we got one more before that week break. And it's someone that Kelsey knows, I believe fairly well. So next week we're going to have the man behind Teacher Goals. And so Brad Weinstein, Brad's awesome. I did meet Brad. There was another author, Kelsey, that I kind of collaborated with Teacher Goals on one of the launches. I believe it was Dan Jones, if you know Dan Jones.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's awesome.
Oh, Dan's amazing. And Dan's supposed to be back at some point this season. And so Dan, if you are listening, yes, I'm looking at you to book it in. But yeah, so Brad's going to be on talking all things books, Teacher Goals. Like I'm super pumped to hear about the journey of Teacher Goals. Like Teacher Goals is one of those places online that I've always seen, but I don't really know the story, right? You don't know the story. So I'm really curious to learn about that next week.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna have to watch, because I've loved when I first heard that they published and everything, I was like, oh wait, I thought it was just a page with like memes and stuff. Like they always make me laugh, but they do so much more. And they brought together some amazing authors. I mean, and I'm not talking about, I love my book too, but I mean the other authors, like I'm just so honored to be in their company. Like they brought together some amazing people. So I love it. I love everything that they do. And they've been great to work with as well.
Yeah. And my little collabs, there's been a couple that I've had with them, just super kind, super willing to connect and collaborate. But yeah, so Kelsey, thank you so much. We really appreciate all of the wisdom that you've shared. I've learned a lot. I feel Sophie's learned a lot. I feel like I'm going to go perhaps do some yoga today and reflect on, how do I get this time back? And while I'm not in the classroom full time anymore, ed tech industry can be.
Yeah. The tech industry. Yeah, yes, for sure.
It can be a lot too. So really appreciate everything that you shared. I know my listeners appreciate it. And looking forward to our next conversation.
Yes. Yeah. We'll have you on the show soon. Yeah. We'll get in touch about that. Thank you.
Very fun. Very fun. All right, friends, for all that are watching, listening, what have you, keep your hats on, but your minds open. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday.